doing it. Wow. Okay, great. This meeting is being recorded. If you don't want your name or your background or anything in the recording, you can change your name by just clicking on it and then hit rename. So if you want to be anonymous or if you want to be a blank screen, that's totally cool too. And then, yeah, again, if you guys want to introduce yourself in the chat, and if you know the name of the place where you are, the native name or the land that you're currently residing on, you could place that there in the chat too. So mabuhay Tule from the Northeast Tongva lands on Turtle Island. And then I do feel like someone is, I'm gonna mute you. I'm gonna mute you. I don't want that to be like offensive, I'm sorry. We're just gonna try to make this pretty decent here. I'm gonna turn down the Madonna. All right. A couple more here. Okay, I think that's good. Cool. You guys okay? Hi, Leslie from Eva Beach. Okay, hold on. I guess I have to mute all. All right. Whew. Hi, Sarita and Lida and Oloni Lands. Hi, you guys. Hi, Roxanne. Okay, I'm still admitting people, you guys, so I'm just gonna try to do it as I kind of start talking, but awesome. Wow, this is such an incredible experience. I don't think I've ever been in the same room with all of you guys at once. It's like, it would be completely impossible. Donnie, you sent yours just directly to me, so I'm just gonna, oh, you got it. I'm gonna just make sure that this is going to, my brother just texted me, did you do push-ups yesterday? Because I did. We're on this like push-up challenge. We're doing 100 push-ups every day. I'm doing it, people. You can do it too. So yes, I did. Okay, awesome. Great. I'm going live on Instagram too, just cause. And I think we're good to go right now. So thank you everybody so much for coming. I know it's kind of hectic when you're like managing Zoom and other things, but I know that Saturday, everyone's probably getting up and getting going, or the people who are like in Chicago, it's already 3 p.m. But I'm just really stoked for everyone to be here. And I know some of you have already heard a little bit about my work and my thesis, but I just wanted to give another sort of rundown of what it was and what it is, because so many people were not able to experience it, mainly because of the shutdown situation that happened here. So the exhibition is currently up in the gallery at UH, but the entire university is closed. So it's kind of interesting and funny that we're all here hanging out in the same kind of way that we would have been in the space. And because of time and, you know, distance restraints, it's really, really awesome to have people here from Chicago, New York, DC. As you can see in the chat, there's like so many amazing people here. Yvette's coming in right now from Eva Beach. So yeah, just thank you. And I hope you guys know that you're totally my family, and this is like a family conversation. So feel free at any moment to just jump into the chat and add any kind of comments. I'm going to be trying to monitor and talk at the same time. And if anyone has any problems, please just, I think the best thing if we do experience any kind of Zoom bombing situation is I'll just try to like manage it, but I hope that everyone can kind of like stand by. I think we should be good though. But yeah, oh, just had a beautiful butterfly fly by, awesome. So I wanted to ask everyone to just take a second. We're gonna do like a little bit of a centering, just a breathing to get everyone settled in. So if you're on the floor or if you're lounging, just kind of get into a comfortable spot. And we're just gonna send out a little bit of love to the folks who can't be here and to our ancestors and just everyone who's on this call too. So just take a minute to close your eyes and really feel all the air that's flowing around you. whether you're in Chicago area or you're in Washington State. Just want you to take a deep breath in. Giving thanks to all of the amazing beings that are around us right now. From the butterfly that just flew by to the birds that are chirping. We probably got some worms underneath us somewhere. And just give some thanks and gratitude for the ability to be here in our bodies, in these places in which we are, with this technology that connects us in these ways. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to be here. So we'll take one last breath in. And big breath out. Yes, we made it, people. We made it. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm so happy to see all your faces. So what I'm going to do today is basically go through a run through of my thesis exhibition, give you guys some sort of like behind the scenes looks at what the process was like, and talk a little bit about some of the work and the pieces that were in there and the workshops that happened. I'm gonna kind of plug some of the new stuff that I'm gonna be working on, and I want to have like a pretty robust Q&A. So because I feel like that's gonna be more interesting than me just talking at you guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and start my screen share. For those of you who are just joining us, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat here and just share where you're from and maybe something about you. Some people are sharing like how they know me, which is really awesome too. So I'm gonna go over here. And thank you for your patience while I do this by myself, because I've been on a lot of Zoom meetings, but okay, let's see. Can I do it? Put a lot of embarrassing pictures of myself and other people in this just for you guys. Frick, I don't think I got one of Kiki though. Okay, wait, hold on. Present. Okay. Everyone's good on audio and stuff, yeah? Okay, I'm just gonna make sure I can see some of you guys over here too. All right, so welcome to my artist talk, you guys. My name is Rebecca Maria Goldschmidt. If I don't know you, that's so awesome that you're here, because I'm just so grateful for the folks who are coming in, maybe just from like following me on Instagram or maybe knowing me from other places. But I just wanted to remind everyone that today is my mom's birthday, May 9th. Woohoo! So congratulations, Alex says yay to my mom. I know that it's been really hard for everybody to be in quarantine. So I just wanted to celebrate her and all the moms. It's Mother's Day weekend. So if you're a mom, congratulations to you and thank you so much for everything that you give us. And I just want to thank my mom because she wasn't able to come to the show because of all the whole shutdown situation. So I'm super happy to show her the work in this way. So this is a picture of me when I had just finished sewing all of the pillows for the exhibition. The name of the show is Pag+mul+mula+an, which means the place of plants or the place of planting. And that is in the language of Ilocano, which is my grandmother's language. It's from the island of Luzon, which is in the northern Philippines. The big top island where Manila is also located. We're further up north from there, and they're from a region called Pangasinan. So as some of you guys probably know, I was living in Mexico previously to coming to UH for my studies here at the University of Hawaii. And I really had no idea about the Philippines when I was living there. I didn't have very much experience in the history or in any of the really culture. I think I grew up in Chicago in a Midwest sort of fashion. My dad's family is German Jewish and my mom's family is from the Philippines. So I grew up in a very mixed household, but there was definitely a heavy emphasis on the Jewish side of my upbringing and going to Hebrew school and stuff like that. And so when I was living in Mexico, I started thinking about, like, I was teaching photography there, and I was working with Las Fotos project and the Aja project, and a lot of folks here are from that time in my life, and I'm so happy that you guys can hear to see how this has sort of transitioned. But I felt like I was teaching younger people and teenagers how to do this sort of identity exploration and using the camera and photography for social justice, but I didn't really feel like I had a good grip on like my own personal background, right? And where I was coming from, just in terms of like understanding the Philippines, even understanding, you know, Jewishness and Germanness is also a whole other thing too. But just from that perspective, and I knew that Mexico was a place that sort of transitioned me into this. So I have to give thanks and props to all of mis compas y mis amigos ahí en Mexico that have really trained me to think about the world from like a non-US perspective, from a much more critical perspective. And a lot of the work that I was doing on the border was very much related to yes, yes, it's coming, champ. Was related to is related to what I'm doing now. So I'm moving the slide now. Is that going to do it? Oh, there we go. So I wanted to center myself here in the Valley of Palolo, which is in the Ahupua'a of Waikiki, which is actually, so a lot of people probably have heard of Waikiki as like the famous beach in Honolulu. But the name of our entire system, which actually goes from like the top of the mountain, the whole water system, the watershed, from the top of the mountain down the valley and into the bay, into the waters of Waikiki, is actually called an ahupua'a. There are a couple of Hawaiian words in here too, and I'm mainly just saying this to center myself and recognize that I am not of this place, but I have a responsibility or a kuleana to this place, and understanding where I am in these islands and what my responsibility is to this place and the Hawaiian people has been really, really important to me in my studies here. And I think I'm so excited that Joy and Kim Kompak and Kyle and all these folks are on this call, because really, I mean, you guys have trained me so well in understanding what it is to be a settler on a place of native land, and what it means to work sort of side by side and take on that responsibility of being an advocate for the place and the Aina, which is the land of Hawaii. So, okay, this is my view. I wanted to show you guys this. I'm sitting right here and I'm looking out this way. So I'm really blessed to be here. This is my smiley face of where I am right now. You guys can see this is the Ahupua'a right here, Waikiki. And here's Diamond Head, if you guys haven't seen that. And then Pu'uloa is Pearl Harbor, and this is the bigger island. So just so you guys can understand a little bit of where I am right now. So I wanted to share this self-portrait. This is like one of the early photos that I did of myself in my studio. And I did a lot of work in my studio while I was at UH. And I feel like I wanted to share this because I went through so many different transitions of my thinking and what I was really studying. And I think coming into the university, I was just like overwhelmed with books. I think a lot of people, shrimp chips, shout out to the shrimp chips. A lot of people feel like, oh my God, I was just like, oh my God, I'm at university. I have access to so much materials and resources. I checked out literally like every single book on the Philippines that there was. And I just read so much. And I think a lot of you guys have been with me on this journey, and I was live streaming readings and doing all kind of different stuff. But there was like a major shift in just the thinking about my place in the world as I understood more about the history of the Philippines and the history of the American interaction with the Philippines. And so my critique, I feel like, of the university, I know it's like hard to critique the university within the university, right? Because I'm still benefiting from it. I'm still, I guess, using, like, that system is still supporting me. It's paying me. I'm part of it. But I think as I've been working at school and with other graduate students who have been actively really trying to hold the university accountable for their actions, that really came into play for me as I was working in this space. So not only was it like a personal exploration, but it was also which I think is like the absolute privilege of being in art school. It's like all about you and your psychology and like your mental status. But it also, like, for me, played into a larger role of like, how can I be as a student, as an activist? How can I use my voice and the platform that I have and the resources and the materials and also the access to money that I have to do things that can push the boundaries of what a student really is. So yeah, this is just me in my studio. And I also wanted to share, I didn't put too many archival photos, but this was one of the images that I saw that I think was really, really powerful for me in my process, and you'll see kind of why. But this is a class engaged in cutting strips of cloth for bag fillers. And this is, I think, I'm not exactly sure where this is, probably somewhere, maybe in Manila in 1917. So brief history, the United States basically had this transaction with Spain in 1898 in which the colony was sort of turned over to the United States, and the Americans took over. There was like a long bloody revolution that the War of Independence that the Filipinos were fighting against Spain, and then America sort of swept in and took over the space and basically recolonized it. And then there's so much history that I could talk about, but one of the things that became really important to me, especially in studying women and the history of women in the Philippines, was this idea of labor and textile labor, and how women's work and domestic labor was sort of co-opted. And as the transition, and like back in the colonial Spanish times, the transition into capitalism and the privatization of property really, I guess, overthrew the system of working and communality that existed, and trade and bartering. I mean, it wasn't that they didn't have like exchanges, but the privatization of land really screwed up basically the position of women in society, and that was also very much tied to the work that women were doing in textiles. So as I kind of progressed through my research, the more that I thought about what happened to the Philippines and what continues to happen, and the state of women right now in the Philippines, and in terms of like needing to leave to work as overseas foreign workers, or needing to work in prostitution, or different kinds of ways that women are required to work now because of the economic situation, is all rooted in the colonial histories of the place. So this photograph clearly is posed, and it's little girls ripping up cloth for bag filler. I'm not even sure exactly what the material is being used for, but it was images like this that really got me thinking about group work, participatory practice, textile and labor situations, and also gender issues. So here's me and Brenda, who is my assistant.
What happened?
Oh, Mom, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, but I lost your video.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna mute you though. Sorry.
How did that happen?
I don't know, but keep listening. I'm here. Okay, sorry guys, but yeah, so as like that transition's clear to everybody, but I think so for me it was about reclaiming a lot of the material practices of my ancestors, whether that was like knowledge through plant material, mostly plant material, or language. So I've also been studying Ilocano for the past couple of years, and the University of Hawaii is the only program where you can do that outside of the Philippines on a sort of institutional level. So I really initially came to Hawaii because of that opportunity, because I knew that I could be blending, or pretty much like using the art space and the art department and the art degree of an MFA as a way to fund and give me access to the university resources, but also allow me to study my grandmother's language. So a lot of you guys know I studied German in an undergrad. That was my undergrad degree. And I also studied Spanish after that and lived in Mexico. So this was a way for me, it was like a stepping stone to the Philippines for me. And it was a way to, I guess, bridge these sort of empty spaces of not really knowing what the Philippines was really about. So, oh, here comes my mom again. Okay. So throughout the process, I'm going to go a little bit faster because I could talk on forever about this. But basically, I designed a space that was for the communal conversation and sharing of knowledge. And that was really about plant knowledge, ancestral knowledge, and language. And so this is my Ilocano class, Ilocano 302. And these are my friends and fellow classmates who were helping me in the production of this. And various people came through to help with this. This was a class, oh, that's a really crappy pixelated version of this awesome panoramic. But my goal was, there were multiple goals, one of which was to just take up space in general in the university space. So I would like to spread out and sprawl. I took over various studios besides my own. My own studio was kind of like a living room space. A lot of people on this call were able to come into that space and work with me there. Taking up communal spaces, I took up GRIC, which is like a secondary gallery space that I converted into a workshop. And I also converted the weaving studio. I moved all the looms over to the side and converted the weaving studio into a workshop space too. So it wasn't only just about the, I guess, the work that was being done and the learning that was happening, because I didn't really know how to do any of these things, right? I was not a textile person when coming in. I mainly worked in photography, and I was definitely not a plant person. And so kind of getting to know the materials was really very much part of the process, but also a very communal process of working together. These are some friends. Lisa, I don't think Lisa's here, but she's from Berkeley. And I put these in here because, and there's Bo, little doggy, because the space itself was just so conducive to hanging out and napping and lounging and having this sort of different experience. I felt like the university was very rigid, and even though we're in the art department, there are certain kinds of conversations that were always happening, and I felt like the conversations that I needed to have and that I wanted to have weren't happening. So it was sort of up to me to carve that space out for myself. Think a lot of you probably feel that way in your own programs of like, oh, this isn't, especially as a person of color or a woman. I mean, I was really like the only person. There were a couple other folks in the department, but I was like really the only person doing this kind of work. Joy, are you saying say that again because you didn't hear it, or are you like, AO? Say that again, like that, say that again. Yes, the art department at UH, I love it, but there need to be some changes. We have no Native Hawaiian faculty. There's very few people of color. It's pretty much a like white man's situation, and white women. And so coming in as a Filipino person, Hawaii is 25% Filipino, but literally like one person could give me references to Philippine artists or to Filipino culture in general. I had an amazing mentor named Paul Levy, who's a Southeast Asian art historian, and he really helped me broaden my perspective. And Caroline Basie also was my Philippine visual art history class professor. And that was the first time they've ever taught that class. Like the university has so many Filipinos, like there's not enough information. And I think there's other folks on this call who could probably verify, like we are still very marginalized within the system, and getting up into graduate level, like there's very, very few of us. Champ's here, Adrian's here, like you guys can all speak to that too. So these were spaces that I was intentionally just setting up so everyone could just crash and hang out and have fun and relax. And that was also really what the Ilocano programs classes are like too. It's very much like a safe space for people to gather together and speak in that way. So I also worked in the digital imaging lab. So there's Kiki setting the light up for me and helping me as my assistant in the print lab. But I also had access to like these giant printers. So learning these kinds of technologies at the same time as learning how to make coconut rope or weave, I was really interested in how those things were going to come together. And then I wanted to share a couple of images. Like this is one from my studio of Jess. I don't think Jess is in here. And then on the right is my grandma, Grandma Feli, who's not really my grandma. She's my auntie grandma. She's like my grandma's cousin, but I call her grandma, and she lives in Kapolei, which is just like up the island from here, about 45 minutes. And so I feel like I've really been super grateful to be surrounded by a lot of incredible women, especially friends and family here on Hawaii, because I don't think I would have been able to do this work without those kind of spaces of support and guidance. And people, I mean, this picture is of Jess in my studio, but it was like these sort of flows in and out of the space that were really helping me get my thinking to where I got it. So, okay, now finally on to the actual exhibition. This was the flyer for the show. And these are kind of some of the more, I guess, theory that I was using to think about this. So Nepantla, which I think a lot of you guys are familiar with, the sense of like in-betweenness that exists in the border space. And I was interested in thinking about this in the Ilocano language. So my professor, Manong Agkoili, shared this word with me, which is nagbabaetan. And that means also in-betweenness, or a state of flux, transition space. So I wanted this space that was going to be inside the official art gallery downstairs, which is a very, very Western, white walls kind of space, to be transformed into something that was like a transitional space of learning and sharing. And then another word that I brought in from Ilocano, I spent like the first year asking all the Ilocano people that I was running into, what's your favorite word in Ilocano? And so many people said this word. So it was kind of like, it was just so interesting. It's nasalimet means like frugal, or like very like tight-fisted in a certain kind of way, but also resourceful. And I guess available and knowledgeable in knowing how to like get what you need to get at the with the most least amount of like spending, kind of. And I also was thinking about rasquachismo, which is a sort of like 90s Chicano art making aesthetic, which is about making do. And just the idea of, I think a lot of our families have this like because we come from diasporic backgrounds, or we come from immigrant families, that we have this sense of like, you know, this is what I got and I'm going to make with it what I have. And like just using all the little bits and pieces and bringing all those little things together to build something bigger. So that those were kind of like the terminologies that I was thinking about. So this was the space itself. These were the big hangings that ended up being created. So all of the different images that you saw of folks making stuff ended up being strung together in these large pieces. And then all of these pillows are the ones that I was making too. I need to also make sure to definitely shout out my partner, Alex, who's in the kitchen right now eating something. But he is the person responsible for harvesting all these materials, and he works with coconut trees and bamboo and doing other tree trimming stuff. So I'm super grateful. None of this would have been possible without his labor and work. So thank you. I got a shaka for that. Okay, so in the background here, you guys can see the bamboo that's on the outside. So I really was trying to create this indoor-outdoor space where people could hang out. This is a larger weaving that I did with karamungay pods. Again, like I wasn't trying to create any sort of like authentic, like what is an authentic Filipino space? I think I kept coming up against like that kind of thinking of like what is an Ilocano space? What is a Filipino space? And really questioning what all of these terminologies even mean. Like, what does Filipino mean to me? What does it mean to be Ilocano? Does it mean I have to speak the language? Does it mean I have to like emerge from this one particular area? And learning about the migrations of peoples and all of the different combinations and movement, I've really been like almost like just completely turned off by even identifying as Filipino or Ilocano at all, because I know that my background is so mixed with so many other things. So I was really trying to just bring in my own personal aesthetics and combine them with things that I was seeing and experiencing when I went to the Philippines, when I was, talking to weavers over there. So this is a large like collective weaving that people started finishing it at the exhibition. This was sort of the wall text that went along with it. Pag+mul+mula+an is a place of plants. a learning environment, a metaphorical garden space where we reclaim ancestral knowledge and cultivate new ways of knowing, and a gathering space rooted in the philosophies and practices of the Ilocano people in the context of their language, culture, in and outside of the Philippines and through the diaspora too. So I'm gonna move on a little bit quickly here because you guys see this. And I wanted to describe this poem a little bit. This is a giant, so speaking of, this is where the digital printing came in. So I started printing on material, and this is a cotton. It's actually it's a hand-woven cotton. It's from India. And I kind of was like, there's a lot, I won't even get into that, but basically it's a print of a page, which is a scan from a book. And the book is like a 1932 copy in the UH library of the Pag+mul+mula+an, which is our epic poem. I'm going to type it in the chat in case people want to look that up. The Pag+mul+mula+an is an epic poem that is said to be the first recorded oral history of the Philippines. I'm not sure like how much of that is really true, but it is definitely documented, and it's basically like the oral genealogy of the Ilocano people. It traced back to this kind of epic poem. And so this image is like the 4th to 9th stanzas of the poem, and it speaks of Namongan, which is the mother of Lamang, who is the epic hero. And it speaks of, it's basically just sharing like what she ate when she was pregnant and how her and her partner, her husband, were preparing a bamboo bed for her to lie down on to give birth to this child who would go on to be this epic hero. So I was really into this because not only it shared like all these amazing fruits and like shellfish and snails and things that they were eating, but it also is sort of like a reminder of the mother as the center of this sort of conversation, and also the that we are born of the things that our mothers feed themselves with, and those were a relationship to the land and like a foraging and cultivating situation. So on the back side of that wall are some more archival images and digital prints of schools from the Library of Congress and various other archives that I was finding. And they're group photos of children in American schools. So you can kind of see this is another one of girls making lace in a Red Cross school. And here's another one of girls doing embroidery. So I, again, became fascinated by this idea of textiles and this like handiwork and domestic work as a colonial practice that was imposed upon people, but also has indigenous roots and has previous roots. So there's this like mixing up and complication of that practice that I really liked, and I thought the photos were just essential to have in the space, but not necessarily defining the space. So they are kind of like on the outside of this, which I think some people were like, well, are you re-marginalizing the images? But if you're stepping back from this space, like this sort of, it's a secondary entrance to the space. You can enter from 2 different ways. So I really wanted to, again, reflect back on the history of education in the Philippines, which has completely been in English since the American period, and that my position in the university is also part of this trajectory. And so I'm kind of like flipping it around a little bit and being like, yes, I'm grateful to be in school. Yes, thank you for paying me to do my research. But also we need to look at these histories and understand how the things that we're learning in this space are actually things that were erased and removed from our ancestors and our historical lineage through American education. These are just some close-ups of some of the weavings and the pillows, and I did stuff all of the pillows with that shredded paper from the university too, from the HR department and from the physics department, astronomy. I had other grad student who was in the astronomy department who was giving me all his shredded paper and homeworks and stuff. And so for me, like having all of the trash of the university like at the basis of this was really powerful for me, because I was just like, there was so much conflict happening at the university with the Mauna, with the conflict of Mauna Kea, with the university funding this telescope that's going to be put, or not going to be put, at the top of the most sacred mountain for the Hawaiian people. And then these textiles are from Sarat, which is the hometown of President dictator Marcos of the Philippines. So there's just a lot going on here in terms of materiality and meaning that I think it's not totally apparent at the first glimpse, but I wanted to share some of those little sort of details with you guys. Some other stools I found in the trash. So everything was repurposed and reused. Adrian's banig is like right here. Wait, where's, oh no, it's this one is Adrian's. This is Yoko's banig. So I asked people like, can I borrow this? Can I borrow that? Can I get this from you? And so by combining everyone's work and offerings together, we were able to put the whole space together. So it definitely wasn't just me making all of this stuff. This is like, again, an image of there's a zine too, and I'll plug that in a minute. But Adrian also has some writings in there. Champ has some writings in there. Deborah, Manong Akuili. So there's Sarita. Everyone has, I had asked people who were participating in the space to share writings, and we put that together in a zine. Here's the bamboo bench, which someone also said that reminded them of a canoe, and that the canoe as a classroom is an interesting concept. And then here's Alex giving his talk on coconut weaving. So I then also, not only did I make all this stuff, right? I then programmed the whole month of the space to have different people, different practitioners, mostly people who work with plant materials, to share their mana'o, or their story and their knowledge of their work in that space. So Alex was sharing about coconut leaf. Nanea was sharing about Kalo. She was the first one to kick it off, and she gave us a great demo on the outside of the exhibition. So this was in like the breezeway of the art building, where most people are just using it as a walkway to go back and forth between buildings. We basically just plopped down in the middle of that walkway and took it over and talked about Kalo and the history of Gabi, is what it's called in Ilocano, and its history and relationship as the older brother to the Hawaiian people. And then Nico Hinden, who's also an amazing artist from Aotearoa. She's Maori, and she was in our program in the first year, and she just felt so unsupported. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking for you, Nico, but I feel like in our conversations, she was completely not supported as a Native artist making contemporary artwork in our department, that she left and she went back to New Zealand. And her work has since totally taken off. She's an incredible practitioner. She basically is single-handedly bringing back kapa beading for Maori people. And I think even in the Philippines too, we also have kapa. We have this bark cloth aute material that we've used, but there are very few people who practice it now. And it's something that is a practice that's very, has been renovated and brought back to the Hawaiian people through various people's work. And to have Nico there and sharing her work, I think was really powerful too. And there's also someone I think who's going to try to start doing a renovation of resuscitation, I don't know, bringing kapa beading back to like contemporary Philippine practice too. Okay, I'm gonna just move on, and I think that might be it, because I want to open it to questions, and I've already been talking for a while, but this is just some images of Nico's workshop. Oh, okay, there we go. Also wanted to mention that so that was like a week of programming, and then we totally got shut down by this coronavirus thing. It was so crappy. And Adrian, like, I'm so grateful because Adrian and Caroline led this amazing film screening and conversation. And I love these pictures by Leanne that Leanne Roselle took for us of the film playing in the space. And this film was, it's called Walang Rape sa Bondok, and it was about whether or not there exists I guess I'll say the filmmakers, two women and another guy, were going back to Bontoc, which is a part of the Cordillera Mountains, the indigenous peoples of northern Luzon. A lot of them are located in this area in the mountains of the island. And this filmmaker, Ate Carla, went there with her assistant to try to understand better how rape culture developed and whether or not it existed in pre-colonial Bontoc culture. So the film's really incredible. I encourage everyone to try to see it if they can. But we just had a really fantastic conversation about gender and rape and sexual assault and all of those kind of horrible things in the Philippines and in Filipino culture. And this was like the closing conversation before the whole exhibition got shut down. And it was just really powerful to be there. It had taken you guys, what, like 3 tries to get the film to be screened. So we were like, we can't shut this one down. Like it was like that moment where everyone was like, do we cancel everything? And we ended up going through with it. And I think it was a really good choice. And it just kind of was another example of how powerful this kind of space can be for the community and these kind of conversations. All right. Oh, that was just a cool shot from the outside. Thank you, Leanne. Okay, I'm moving into other stuff now because I feel like I've done all that stuff and I want to ask you guys questions. And I want you guys to ask me questions. But I also want to kind of propose a couple of things to you guys because I'm moving forward with all of these studies and I feel like I've done so much work in making this happen. But I'm also like, okay, then where do I go from here? Do I go on to do my PhD? Do I just become an artist? Like, do I work in schools? Do I teach? And I think with the whole situation with the corona thing, you guys are all experiencing this. And I think all of us are experiencing this as creative people. How do we support ourselves? And Sarita, who is one of my mentors and great friends, and comadres, who's also on this call, did a class the other day on like starting your own Patreon. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time, but I just never really kind of pulled the trigger on it because I was like, I don't know, was that platform right for me? Can I do this or whatever? But I'm going to test it out. And I want you guys to be the first folks. I haven't really announced this to anyone yet, but I knew that most of my family people would be on this call. So it's technically, I'm calling it like, and Rebecca Erev, who's another amazing Patreon person, shared this idea with me that like community supported agriculture, like your CSA, like your farm box that you might get from your like local farmer and stuff, is a way for us to continue to support the farmers and the people working on the land around us. And so for me, I think Patreon was this idea of community supported art making or community supported creativity in which there is like a subscription to something, and that would probably be videos, other kind of content, writings, all of my journals and things that I've been collecting for these past 3 years and going forward. So I wanted to invite you guys to join me with this. And this is like a total experiment. And I think Sarita is like probably like, she's doing it. But you guys can go check that out. It's patreon.com/Rebecca with 3 R's. And I don't really, it's very basic at this point, but if you want to subscribe to me, I'm going to be working. This is like my next couple of months journey as I continue on with this project. And like my main goal, I think, with school was like starting a foundation for a book. And I'm really, really, really looking forward to finally compiling these things. And I think writing my thesis was a great start for that. But I know that all of this stuff needs to be shared on a broader scale and in a really beautiful, just fabulous book. And so I want to invite you guys to be like the first people to be those people who support me if you want to do that. And if you want to share that with someone else, that's awesome too. So that's my Patreon, and I'll plug that again later. But I'll also plug a couple more things and then we can go into Q&A. One is that thank you, amiga, gracias. Thank you guys. The UH MFA program is really great, even though I'm critical of it. I'm always critical of it. But if you guys go to uhmmfa2020.com, I made this website. There's also one for the BFAs. So if you go to uhmbfa2020.com, that's all the undergrad students. They're doing great work too. I'm encouraging everyone to go there and just check out everyone else's work because we have a great cohort. Kat's here. I think Cody's on the call too. I want to shout them all out because this whole thing wouldn't have been possible without their support too. So everyone go check out the images and stuff over there. From the show, I have zines that I still have that are for sale. It's a suggested $20 donation. You could just email me about that, and my email is going to be at the end. I'm plugging all this stuff, and then we can all talk. We decided to go online with some of the programming that was canceled because, you know, I didn't want to just dump everything into this online format. Everyone was freaking out. No one wanted to be on the online university. It was just such a mess. I'm sure you guys felt like that whole situation play out too. But Sarita and Champ, who are my amazing friends over in Richmond, are going to be doing an online course in a Zoom/Instagram situation. And that's going to be next Friday, May 15th. So if you guys can screenshot that, I'm going to be posting that later today. I feel like this is just the preview of all the stuff that I'm going to be announcing in like the next couple of weeks. But please join us for that. Those people, you guys, I mean, they're my family, but I want everyone to be sharing in this experience of mapping your DIY PhD, which is one of the programs that I did with Sarita when I was in Tijuana, and it was so helpful for me to, I think, honestly, it really got me to the point of even wanting to apply to grad school. But it was a way of thinking about my education and thinking about my learning and my process that was not institutional, and it centered my own sort of like, I guess we'll say like my radical self-love and my own interests, and not feeling like I had to fit myself into a category. And if I didn't do that program with Sarita, I don't think I would have been as interdisciplinary or as interested in so many interlocking spaces as I was for this MFA program. And then I also wanted to plug Laing Hawai'i, which is the nonprofit that I helped start, that we are going to start having Visayan and Ilocano classes online. And we are going to be doing 5 wellness workshops. We got some funding from the Hawaii People's Fund, so thank you so much to HPF for funding this. But we're going to be doing like mental health workshops with kind of a Philippine focus, but anyone really is welcome to join us. So you guys can watch out for that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I feel like I'm going super over time, of course, but I wanted to open it to Q&A because I know there's probably a lot of questions, and I just whipped through all of that. So I'm sorry if I was talking super fast, but yes. If you want to ask a question, you can either put it in the chat or you can just unmute yourself, and that's cool too. Don't be shy.
Hello?
Hello? Mandela?
Yeah, what's up?
What's up?
I had a couple. I'm pretty good, pretty good. I had a couple questions. Well, not necessarily questions right now, but I want to say this is a really good presentation, first and foremost. It seemed like everything that was centered around the actual presentation was, it kind of reminded me of like a libation. I don't know, it just made me think about, you know, an offering to your ancestors or a deity of some sort. And when I thought about that, I also wanted to know, I mean, it pretty much sounds like you're already in like, you know, just as an analogy, you're already in like the swimming pool. At this point, you might as well jump into the deep end. Have you, there's like a lot of people, it sounds like, that's in your community too. Have you all like put yourself in a position or thought about possibly purchasing some land so that you can kind of operate outside of like particular institutions also, even though you do have support? I mean, land is so critical because not only, you know, it's a home base, you can also do a lot of stuff with it. And, you know, you can cultivate the land, you can grow food, you could, you know what I mean? It's a safe haven for children. There's a lot of things that kind of play into the equation. So have you all thought about that? Because it sounds like at this point, most of the stuff has, I was listening to this thing, I was last night with like Maya Angelou, and she was talking about turning struggles into triumph. So even with the access of, you know, paper scraps and all of this other stuff, I mean, literally everything in the presentation was something that was kind of turned into, you know, something for salvation. So yeah, in regards to the land thing, have you all been able to kind of sit down together collectively and come to an agreement, because you could possibly speak with some people who could provide funding, who could provide uh, assistance, even if it was in regards to information that could possibly get you on track to kind of go in that direction too. Because I mean, you know it like I know it. I'm here in Chicago, and
Mm-hmm.
you only have so much time or a window in regards to operating in other people's institutions.
Yep. I'm going to stop share real quick so we can just go into our chat mode. There we go. Thank you, Mandela. I'm so grateful for you and this comment. Thank you for sharing that. And you know, I grew up in Chicago too, so we know how limited access to land can be. I mean, I was grateful to have a backyard, and my grandmother cultivated the front yard and the backyard of both of the houses that we grew up in. And it was really freaking small. But you know, you could grow a lot on a small area. So that's a great question. And yes, I think, yes, I have considered this, but also I think the politics of land here are very complicated, right? And I think the politics of owning land are complicated. That's like a whole other freaking, like we could probably just do a whole conversation on just land, right? But I think specifically being in Hawaii, personally, I don't know if I would feel comfortable owning my own land or even collectively owning land unless there was Native Hawaiian stewardship of that land first.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't necessarily, we don't have to think of it in terms of like you as a
Mm-hmm.
particular entity, but like as a collective.
Yes.
Like, it's happened before on many scales or so. So, I mean, the
Yes.
community could literally own, I mean, even if it was at a point where uh, you all were putting your own hard-earned money into, you know, a particular pot, so everyone was like a stakeholder or shareholder of some sort.
Yes, like
So,
a co-op. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So I think there are already a million, not a million, but a lot of really, really solid foundation organizations that do land restoration and stewardship programs. And in Palolo Valley, I'm not really familiar with, there are a couple schools here that I think are doing that and cultivating in that way.
Mhm.
But in terms of how can I say this? Like, I think so through Laing, which is the nonprofit that I'm helping run, we have decided to give funds specifically to these programs and to continually get our students involved in working with the Native Hawaiian community to do more like on the ground, like working on the land practices. So I think that's for us as a group, like as the group that I feel like is the most viable for me to work with right now in that way. We've been really adamant about doing that and sort of redirecting some of our funds into those things. Like it's a question of reparations, right? Like it's a question of how do I give back? Like what can I give back? And if I were to own land, like that's like a whole other level of responsibility that I feel like I'm not sure if I can do that as like a singular person, right? But I think like what you're saying as a collective, I mean, there are grants from the state. The state gives like people money to create aloha aina programs, and there are different man, it's just so complicated, like the land situation here, because there are different sort of like ownership levels of land. What are crown lands? What are conservation lands? There's a lot of different things. But I will say that despite all of those things, I'm trying to do my best in growing my own stuff. Like Alex is planting his own stuff. I'm planting stuff here on our house, which is a rental property, right? Like I'm renting from here, but I'm still trying to grow a little bit of my own herbs and stuff like that. But I think you're right, Mandela. And I think that is a big question for all of us. And most of us, I mean, all of us, unless you're a native person from that place, which you're lucky to be, and you're lucky to be and have access to the land where which you came from. I've thought about the same thing in the Philippines, right? Like my family has land in the Philippines, they're farmers there. Do I go back there? And like, that's the only potential land that I could like claim to be mine because it's in my grandmother's name, right? So it's my family ancestral land. So
And
for me, I would feel more comfortable doing that there than I would
yeah,
here. But at the same time, I do participate in and try to work with people here who are doing that for the Native Hawaiian community. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense a lot. Because I don't necessarily believe that any entity could own land.
Right.
Like, I don't really even in my mind, like, but
Yes.
I understand that there are powers to be and people out there who
Yes.
practice ownership over stuff. So if we,
Yes.
like, you know, sometimes you do have to step outside of your own self, you know,
Yes.
especially if I feel like you think if you know you're native to the soil, you have to, you know, like my grandma used to say, people, evilness, you know, evil people, they work 24 hours. So, you know, you still have to put, you know, you got to go through this process sometimes,
Yeah.
you
No, I
know.
think you're totally right. And I do think that collectivity is absolutely the way that is going to be, you know, the future of this, and just trying to um, find the ways. I mean, there are ways. I mean, there are people who have land, they want it to be cultivated, and they, you know, they have a different kind of consciousness. And I think that's why I'm so grateful to be in Hawaii, because I'm learning so much about all of these things, right? Like in Chicago, the conversation I think is probably really different. As it in California, it's different from anywhere too. But yeah, I think I'm gonna let Rebecca in. I think there's a lot to be done, and I think for me personally, working on the language aspect of it and getting folks here, and you know, trying to tap into and work with the Filipino community here and get us on, or at least like see where people are at, and try to encourage folks to get more rooted in their ancestral stuff. I just gave this presentation yesterday to Farrington High School, which is like over 60% Filipino students. And I gave it to their Ilocano class. And of course it's like high schoolers. So like all the, all the videos are muted. And you're like, is anyone out there? Is anyone listening to me? But I know that they were, because they filled out my survey, and my survey to them was about, does your family or you practice any kind of planting, you know, practice at home? How, you know, what kind of plants are you planting? What are you growing? Who teaches you about plants? And I'm doing some research that it's for my Ilocano class, and I have to write my paper in Ilocano. It's really scary, but it's basically about whether or not it's interesting or important to high schoolers to have these skills. And all of them, not all of them, but I would say probably like more than 50% gave an absolute 10 on the linear scale of like, do you want to learn how to plant your own food? And then some people were like, nah, it doesn't really matter to me or whatever. But I think that was, for me, just a really, really basic show of hands, kind of like what kind of programming we need to institute. And then Manang Jennifer, who just told me yesterday that they just got approved to do a kind of more hands-on INA-based or land-based programming for that Ilocano program in the high schools. So, and KKV, which is Kukulkahi Valley, they're doing amazing stuff in a different valley called Kalihi, where there's a lot of immigrants from the Pacific, Micronesia, from Philippines. So I volunteer sometimes with K-Vibe, which is their bike shop, and I'll do like workshops, photo workshops for them. And so I feel like tapping into all of these resources and like cross combining is really important. And especially with regards to land, they have like a big farm in the back of the valley that they work, and the young people are learning how to grow stuff there. And what's awesome about that is that it's so intercultural and intergenerational. So for me, it's like a little far. I don't drive, so I ride my bike. So it's a little far for me to get up to the back of that valley. But I feel like every valley needs to have something like that. I mean, the system itself is like built for cultivation, right? Like it's been cultivated so expertly by the Hawaiians in the past, but right now it's just like in a transitional state. Like I really do see it moving. Even in the 3 years that I've been here, I've learned so much. And the movement towards, I mean, look, we're freaking totally shut down. Tourism, we have the highest rate of unemployment in all of the United States. We're at 37% unemployment. Everyone's lost their jobs because it's all based in tourism. So the shift really needs to be to these systems. So if the Filipino community can also get on board with the Hawaiians and be like, yes, we support this kind of agricultural supportive system that isn't just feeding other people. It isn't just like sending papayas to California or sending sugarcane, which is like the long history of, right, the plantations here, which is why Filipinos are even here in the first place. If we can shift to an agricultural, like self autonomous supporting system, it's going to be, it can be a really radical change. Thanks, Mandela, for that question. And I'm going to move, because there's another question in here that I saw, which was Champ. He says, curious on how critique was like for you during your time in academia, and do you find this format can still be helpful for artists contextualizing work outside of Western art histories and traditions? Great question. Man, I mean, so many of you guys have been in art school or in art school, and critique is just fucking horrible. Like, there's so many things that I got out of it, but I feel like what I got out of it maybe wasn't, I just feel like the most obvious showing of, and maybe I'm just being triggered and being flashed back right now, of just like ignorance and racism and just like flagrant like misunderstanding of other people's cultures, to me, were exposed during critique, which is maybe the best place for those things to happen. But like, it was offensive. And then Joy, perfect comment, Joy, that's because UH doesn't know how to teach proper critique and is racist, which is true. But and if anyone else is here wants to chime in on this, that feel free to do that. But I really honestly think I've like led and sat in on undergrad critiques. I've been in my own critiques. I've, you know, had these kind of conversations in different ways. And I personally think that there definitely needs to be like maybe some priorities set in terms of like the boundaries of like what we're talking about. I think sometimes, you know, they always say like, it's not about your opinion. Like, don't tell me what you think about this thing. Like, just give me formal critique. But you cannot, how do you separate like the subjective from like an objective comment on like, well, I think, you know, this or this or this. Like, you're not even really supposed to say, I think, right? Like, you're supposed to be like, how does this challenge blah, blah, blah. I think specifically from my professors and the my committee, like the people that I was working with, they're good artists, but I think they could use some background training in how to manage situations within the critique, how to manage people's own personal, you know, mental health issues. Like, I think a lot of people can feel like this or feel like this who've experienced art school and a graduate level. Like, there's some gnarly shit that people say between the professors. And I personally think like my cohort and my friends and the other classmates were really supportive, and I think that was helpful to me. But coming down, like the top down, like from the professors to me, man, I would come home. Alex just said this the other day. He's like, I'm so glad your committee meetings are over, because those were like horrible days for me. He's laughing, but it's fucking true, because I would be I'd be a wreck. I'd come home, I'd just be sobbing like, oh my God. People told me my shit was ugly. They told me stay away from indigeneity. They told me some gnarly ass shit, you guys. And these are people who are professional, paid by your fucking tax dollars. You know, like, they're professional artists, they're professional people, and they were just downright offensive to me. I would ask people like, who are, you know, what can you tell me about Filipino culture in Hawaii? People would be like, oh, they're my roofers, or oh, my mom laughed. Oh, they're my, you know, they're gardeners. Yes, they're very on a pedestal, right? I mean, it is still the ivory tower. Like, we're talking about an institution that's totally fucking built completely 100%, and I have documents to prove it, on the racist sugar plantation system that created all of the racial dynamics in Hawaii as they exist
That's
today.
art school, Rebecca. In 75, I was at SIU just taking basic art. And you can't believe what they would critique you. You're like, this is art classes, this is what you do. And I was studying science too. I mean, I took science for nursing, but I did artwork because I liked art too. And you couldn't believe whatever you did wasn't good enough. I mean, it was condemned. I mean, you talk about a critique. Yeah, that was a critique.
Yeah.
That was the worst condemning of a critique I ever had. And it was the basic art class ever. Basic art. And I couldn't believe how they were critiquing me. I go, I'm just a new student in art, and this is what you're doing to me. So, and that was in 75, darling.
Nothing's changed, Mom. Nothing's changed.
No, nothing's changed.
And I think that Champ is asking that question. Say it, Pat. Champ is asking this question because he's also at Berkeley right now. He's in an MFA program. He's totally, I mean, we talk on the phone all the time, like, oh my God, how did this go for you? How did this go for you? How did this go for you? And I think it's just so important. Like, there needs to be a huge shift in like what a critique even is. Like, can it be a different name? Like, what can we, and I think some of the professors, Peter Chamberlain was pretty cool. And he did like critique games, and we made it into like more of a fun situation. But I really, really think that there's a whole book. My dad sent me a book. I don't know, it's here somewhere.
I'm sure it's all who you know to be able to rise up in the art world. And I just think that, can you imagine all the artists that had just totally been demolished by these kind of people, yes, and they dropped out because, yes, they were so, disgusted. They didn't believe in themselves. It's pretty, yes, sad.
Yes, and I think that is the tactic that they use.
Oh yeah,
to be like, you are not worthy, like, and they say it over and over again. And it's like, on one hand, that makes you stronger, right? But on the other hand, wouldn't I like just flourish and like just be the most abundant, most beautiful artist making what I wanted if everyone around me was like, you got this, like this could be a little bit different, but hell yeah, okay, like what could that look like? And I feel like that's where I just had to turn to people in my community and everyone around me to be like, okay, am I like on the right path here? Because it's such a freaking mind fuck to be in that room, with these people. And Joy, are you saying bye, Joy? Or hop on.
Well, I think too, Rebecca,
Hold on, Mom. Joy is going to talk. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, go ahead, you guys go.
Well, as you know, Rebecca, I used to have to deal with incredibly racist, anti-Hawaiian stuff within the department. And I would just argue back with them. I would just argue at them and be like, you really just don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But not most up and coming developing artists don't know that they can do that. They don't know that they can say, you have no understanding of my culture, so you're not really in a place to critique me on this. If you want to say Hawaiian-ness or call me cliche or whatever it is you want to do, I'm questioning whether or not you have a position here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but not most students, that's the exact way that you will crush their spirit and develop and destroy a developing artist. And the thing is that they rely on the fact that because the art community is so small here, they know we won't make a formal complaint with the university about their racism because it reverberates out into the art community, right? Yeah. I mean, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, which is why I'm going to write a fucking letter this fucking week, and y'all are going to fucking sign it if you want to, and it's going to say, this fucking department has instigated all of these things and perpetrated all of these offenses on people of color, on Native Hawaiian people. It's absurd. It really is. And I think sometimes I second guess myself and I'm like, you're just overreacting, Rebecca.
No, there was a famous protest in the 1990s of them. There was a famous protest where the Hawaiian students, like, that's why there's a Hawaiian art program at Hawaiian Studies. They marched out.
Wow.
And did a famous protest to leave and talk about how completely racist the art department was, and to say that they don't acknowledge Hawaiian art, and they don't teach any Hawaiian art classes at all. They see it as craft, right? I was like, well, you guys teach ceramics and fiber arts,
making,
right? Like, so Hawaiian art is actually seen completely separate and away from the department. And that was a deliberate act on both parts.
Yes,
right?
I think because the Hawaiians were like, fuck this shit. We don't want to fucking be here. And they created their own art program. Did you guys hear that? There's a totally separate art in Hawaiian Studies program. And you know what's really fucked up about that, and Nene Alum, who's not on this call, could totally speak to this better, is she's been struggling as a Native Hawaiian, the only Native Hawaiian graduate student that we have right now, who's an incredible painter. She's been struggling with the fact that all of the art classes are at the same time as all of the Native Hawaiian art classes. So how do you even schedule your fucking program? Oh shoot, here comes Nico. This is perfect. Nico, welcome to
California.
We're talking about how racist the UH art department is. You're right on time. There's totally two separate programs, and why are they not integrated? I had a conversation with John Shostak, who's an art historian, who also gave me my sourdough starter, by the way. And he was like, we were talking about the person who does teach. There is a Native Hawaiian art history class that currently happens, and Nenea was telling me it's like horrific that she just like shows slides and like quotes these like books from like the frickin' 70s. And John was like, yes, well, she's retiring this year, and it's really about time that we get someone to come in to teach it who's not teaching in a 1950s art historical context. Like, what the fuck? That was like 70 fucking years ago. Her curriculum is based in something that was 70 years, like, oh my God. So anyways, that person is retiring. And so I thought that it was just the moment to write this letter, because it is the moment to hire Native Hawaiian art historians and Native Hawaiian professors and other people who are from Hawaii, because most of the point here is that most of the people in the department are not from Hawaii. They've been here for a while. They don't really give a shit about the community here. And how do you build a community that's talking about art in Hawaii that's not even coming up from the community? And I think that's another reason why I feel like, Cody did this too, but we always had, and I love, this were like some of my favorite days in my studio, when we had group tours from the schools. I think a lot of young kids too, like a lot of people are going to college in other places. People don't really necessarily think like, oh, I'm going to go to UH. They're going to go to college in whatever, California or in Washington or something like that. But for the young kids and the high schoolers who are coming up into, who are maybe going to move into the UH track or whatever, so many of them, especially Filipinos and other people of color, are going into medical, nursing, business, all those kinds of tracks. And I'm not saying that like art is like the most viable like pathway to like please your immigrant parents, right? Like, it's like no one wants you to be an artist. They're just like, don't do it, just don't kill yourself, but I think it is really important for people to have role models. So for me, it was really part of my kuleana to be like, I'm going to speak to all the high school classes that I can and be like, I'm doing this. I'm taking Ilocano classes and I'm an artist. I'm going to write an Ilocano art curriculum for the department. And we're going to try to bridge some of those gaps too, between just like the making and the material stuff that we were practicing in this, in this project, that can also be taught in the classroom. Because I think, it's like in the classroom, I'd give little workshops and people would be like, ooh, it's just like we're back on the homeland, and ooh, this is so fun, and like, I've never done this before, or like, oh, I totally know how to do this because my grandpa showed me, or whatever. And there's just so much knowledge there that's already innate, and that's like building it within the younger students, and they're interested. There's like one student that I have, Chachi, I don't think she's on this call, but she's doing her own podcast, and she's interviewing all of her peers about what it's like to grow up Filipino in Hawaii. It's coming from people themselves, but I think, to me, what really needs to change is like the acknowledgement of these people within the university system, the acknowledgement of their histories. And every semester I see some Filipino folks talking about plantation work in Charlie's printmaking like poster class, and I see the posters. But then once you get up to the like next kind of levels, or like the BFA, I don't really see people as much working on identity stuff. Kiki, I feel like, was one of those people who like went on and kept and was working in thinking about like being a Black person and a Black woman within this system too. But there aren't that many students that are encouraged to do that kind of thinking. And so to answer Champ's question, I think it's just like, yeah, the critique system is totally backwards. It doesn't serve us. It never has served us. Like, most of these institutions don't serve us. I'm just going to be aware of time right now. It's 11:18:19. We can rant on this all day long. Maybe it's interesting to people, but if there's any other questions, feel free to jump in. Maeve says, kind of going off Champ's question, as another Filipino artist in a space where there's not much known about the Philippines and culture, Madison, Wisconsin, shout out to the Wisconsin Filipinos. Do you have any advice or words on best practices to share that culture without taking a full education role? How can we make space to have appropriate conversations about our identities, or is that just part of sharing your culture through your work? I'm entering my final year of my MFA. Congratulations, and have taken a focus on my Filipino heritage through paper making and weaving. Loved hearing your talk today. Yes. Oh my God. Thank you so much for that question, and I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you because Madison, Wisconsin is white as hell, but it's also a wonderful place to be and to learn, and it's also a native space too. They have really amazing history there too. I mean, I grew up in Chicago, it's right there. Okay, I struggled with this too. I always find myself being didactic, but I was always interested in education anyways. So for me, it was okay. It was okay to like continue to be that person who's teaching. Like, I think a lot of my work is about teaching and about interacting and sharing the knowledge, right? But I know that there's people who are like, I don't have to teach you shit. I don't have to tell you that this was the history because you should already fucking know. You should already know about the 1906 World's Fair. You should already know about fucking the International Hotel in San Francisco. You should already know about the freaking farm workers striking. That's not my problem. Like, I think we can come from that position now and assume that people have it, the knowledge in the background, or we could come at it and be like, you know what? I know that people don't know about these things and that's not their fault. Like, it's not our fault that we weren't taught this shit. Like, we just grew up in a system that is consistently racist and consistently white supremacist. So if we want to get out of that, we can't just do it like just all the brown people, you know, like other people, everybody needs to be in on demolishing white supremacy and just completely shifting into a world where these are conversations that are normal to be had. So I think your question is kind of like, what are your tips? I mean, one, like for me, yeah, I really embraced education and learning as part of my work and like seeing myself as a learner. And even some of my works that I was doing, I did this piece where I put myself into this like showcase container and I taught myself how to weave on a backstrap loom inside that container. Maybe you guys saw some photos of that, but that whole piece was about me learning and also about sharing. And that was one piece. I remember my critique. I remember we were standing out there and I was getting so frustrated, and maybe Cody remembers this. I was getting so frustrated because everyone was like offering me suggestions on how this could be, or how it could be about this particular moment in time where people were like put in human zoos, like Filipinos were put in these human zoos. And I was just like, fuck, like, why do I have to explain this shit to all you people? And I was very frustrated. It's very frustrating to feel like no one understands your background or your history or your culture. And everyone, I think at the end, text for me is a really powerful way to, if you can learn how to work with text and your images, or text and your video, or whatever you're working with, to give the context in a very, I think you have to get really good at writing. That's something that I've been really trying to hone throughout this whole process, get really good at writing so you can describe what it is, but not necessarily have to like give all the background story, right? Like show a picture. Like I have this beautiful photo that I took of this pig's blood in Pag+mul+mula+an when I was there, and my family slaughtered a pig for this celebration. And I have this beautiful, gorgeous photo. It looks like galactic, of like the pig's blood. And I don't have to say, this is pig's blood and the sacrificial pig's blood means this, you know, like you don't have to give it all away, right? But I think sometimes titling things or giving text can be helpful in giving context and clues. I really like giving clues to it, but not having to like spill it all if you don't have to. But then on the other hand, sometimes like artist talks or conversations or explanatory situations are also better, because then it does give better context. But I do definitely find that as a problem. Like people are not at the same level of just like knowing that you're experiencing and you're studying so much stuff, and you feel like you're just like want to spill over and share so much information. That's how I feel. I think my Instagram has been really helpful for me in just like chronicling some of that stuff and just like throwing it in there. And that's what I think my Patreon is going to be for me too, is just like throwing in this information that like, where do you put it? You know, like, what do you do with all that? Because there is also this, I don't know if Nico's on this call, but there is also this idea that Nico in Mexico was telling me, just the idea of like beauty and aesthetics, right? Like that maybe something that's beautiful can share your idea and can share your context and can share your content with the viewer without having to say all of those nasty things about the fucked up history. And that's why art is amazing, is because we can transcend some of those more like this realm kind of situations. But I personally find that for me, thinking about these works and this work as like an educational tool or as a space for that to happen, for that learning to happen, that for me is part of this. So I hope that's helpful. I'm just rambling here. Doing research and uncovering a lot of the history that becomes accessible by being part of the institution you're in, which is so much information. Being held hostage by academia is just, yeah, totally. Oh, bye, Manon Kyle. Thank you for someone beautiful gave me a virtual lay. So
Tell us about your patron real quick.
Okay. So the Patreon. I feel like I messed up the order of those slides, but that's okay. So the Patreon, I'm going to type it in here.
I have it on the computer here.
Oh, you do? Okay. So Patreon, has anyone used it before? Raise your hand. I know Rebecca has a Patreon. Sarita has a Patreon.
Oops.
These are fantastic ways for us to virtually support each other. So you basically, what happens, and I have it set right now on like a lower scale, so you guys can get in there and have a lower scale, and then probably in like a week and a half or something, I'll like raise it up a little bit more. But it's basically like a subscription. So you pay $3 a month or $10 a month or $50 a month if you're like really balling and you feel like you want to do that. And you, in return, receive offerings from me. So that will be either videos or writings or text, or I want to do some Q&A sessions like this for like the highest level of Patreon patrons. And I think for me, I think it's the moment to sort of step into, like Mandela was saying, like stepping into like owning the land, or not owning, but like collectively working that space. Sarita and I are also working on another project for a more collective sort of media experience for people. I think Patreon is like, okay, I thought about it like this, like my family history on the Jewish side, some of them were bankers, they were wealthy German Jews living in Germany, before the war came, and they were they were annihilated, basically, some of them. But they were also patrons of the arts. And the art system, as I see it set up right now, is not very conducive in the ways of galleries, in the ways of, exclusivity, in the ways of, like my mom was saying, like you got to know who you know to get the space in the space. And I think also this idea of like sort of like hot artists being like immigrant, trans, queer artists, like that whole thing to me is really scary, like how a lot of our identities and our artwork and stuff gets co-opted by like a larger sort of capitalist art making system. So the Patreon for me was a way to sort of like work directly with my audience. What you guys want will be put in there. I think the first thing I have in there is a poll of like, what are you interested in hearing from me and seeing from me? And you guys saw the whole presentation, so you kind of have an idea of what I'm thinking about. But I want that to sort of transition into more of a, I guess it's kind of like, I mean, some of you guys know me from like my blog days when I was blogging with like big things, like back in like 2000 and like whatever, 6, 7, stuff like that. And I was always doing the same thing. I was constantly researching and putting in photos and adding stuff and sharing stuff. And I even had a little shop for a while. And I feel like for me now as an artist moving through like into more academic and more professional setting, right? Like I can teach, or I can make stuff and I could sell that. Those are kind of like my options as an artist, right? Like I can make a stuff and I could like give that to a rich person and they could give me a lot of money. And I just don't necessarily think that's like the appropriate way or the right way for my work to be shared, because a lot of my work isn't necessarily like a thing. And I could convert it into a thing, which is cool. But sometimes I just feel like that's limiting for me. And so the Patreon is really just a way, and I support a bunch of different people on Patreon. I know there's a lot of activists and artists and musicians, and freaking Ani DeFranco. I was just like cruising through who's on Patreon, and Ani DeFranco came up, who's like an artist, who's a musician. She has like 3,000 patrons or something like that. So Ani DeFranco is probably supporting her career not only just through her ticket and album sales, but she has patrons who are like paying her directly to have that kind of more face-to-face interaction. So that's kind of how I would describe Patreon. Does anyone have questions about like what that is or what it does? I mean, Sarita's on here too, and Rebecca's on here too. I don't know if they have any comments on like how it's working for them. I also do want to say that like I feel like this is a moment for me where I'm going to be trying to write curriculum, right? Or I'm going to be trying to write a book. And so how do I have a place where like all of that research is going on? And so that's really what the Patreon is for me right now. And also Rebecca's a good example because she's going to be doing classes. So in the highest level of mine, I have like a mini lecture series where it will be more kind of like educational conversations about these kinds of things. If anyone wants to chime in on Patreon or what, it's kind of like, yeah, crowdsourcing, crowdfunding for artists. Okay, is everybody bored now? Right. Love you, Mom. Oh, I just wanted to do one last thing, which is sing happy birthday to my mom.
Oh,
Can we do
God,
that?
no. I bet he got
Is it gonna work?
John and his little girl saying happy birthday on the phone to me already.
Okay, well, we're gonna do it. Everybody unmute. This is gonna be crazy. I don't know.
I'll listen.
Okay, ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Woo! Happy birthday to you. Woo! Happy birthday.
Dear Rebecca's mom.
Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
And many more. Oh my God.
Everyone's coming in at different times, but thank you so much.
So I feel like it's 11:30. I've talked a lot. If anyone wants to stay on and hang out, that's great. I just thank you guys so much. Oh, oops. Happy birthday, everybody.
Gonna bake you a cake, Mom.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you guys so much for coming. There's so much more to talk about.
Coming over.
Hi, baby. Hi, Kathy. Cuties. Hi, Nico. Good morning. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you. Agyamanak Joy. Agyamanak Unay. Have a great day, everybody. Bye, Joy. Bye, Kim. Bye, Nico. Bye, Mandela. Bye, Giovanna and everybody. Bye, Laura. Gracias. Gracias, David Peña y Luisa. Hola, hola. Shirley. Bye, Diane. Thank you, Karen. Bye, Ursula. Andrea, Jessica, Kiki. I just love seeing everybody's faces. Hi, Crystal. Crystal's lounging. I love it. Bye, Mom. Bye, Rebecca. Oh my gosh.